What are the 10 commandments that you must follow if you are a collector and investor in vintage trading cards? So when you think about virtually any activity out there in the world, there are generally certain rules of the game, if you will, or these notions of prevailing wisdom, right? Things that pretty much everybody knows and everybody kind of agrees in the back of their mind are, these are the things that you probably should do in order to be successful in that given activity. So for example, it is widely understood that people should in general avoid drinking too much, smoking. They should eat lots of vegetables in their diet in order to have a healthy lifestyle, right? And to maximize their longevity or whatever. There's a lot of people out there, right, that still choose not to eat their vegetables. They choose to smoke and drink and all these other activities that are pretty well understood to be like known as rather detrimental to your health in the longer term. And in general, in aggregate, the people that are non-smokers, that are non-drinkers, that eat lots of vegetables and have a good diversified diet, in general, those people tend to come out having more healthy lives, having less major issues or health problems over the course of their lifetime, and in general have a longer lifespan. That is an example of sort of prevailing wisdom, notionally things that people all know. You probably should do it that way, but a lot of people still choose just to do whatever they want anyway. Similarly, if you think about a different type of card game or a card activity, like poker, for example, Texas Hold'em poker. If you go to the casino, right, and you're a complete novice at the game of poker, and you've got a friend with you who's like a real card shark, right, somebody that's really good at just like wheeling and dealing and winning a lot of games and all that sort of stuff, they're probably going to tell you, look, take a look at your cards. You generally want to sit out any hands that don't have like a pretty high-powered face card, like a king or a queen or an ace or something like that. They're probably going to tell you like, your numbers should probably add up to like probably 18 or 19 or 20. Get as close to that 20 mark as you can with your hand when it comes to the sum of your two cards if you're going to think about playing that hand. And they're going to tell you, look, in general, if you've got really low numbers, single-digit number cards that are unsuited, that are far out of sequence from one another, is it possible that you're going to get a straight, after the flop and after a couple more cards hit the table? Sure, it's possible. Is it likely? No. And so, the prevailing wisdom in poker is, unless you want to make a lot of risky bluffs, which can be successful, right? Poker is a game of deception and it's a game of all those other elements. So I'm not here to say like how you should play your poker hands, but if you're a total novice, the guidance you're probably going to get is you only want to play hands that have a lot of good synergy, pocket pairs, really high-powered numbers, kings, queens, aces, jacks, tens, right? All the really high number stuff. Again, not always true. Different people are going to get away with different things. The last example that I'll give is actually from the game of bowling. So if you've ever been to a bowling alley, right, one of the interesting insights about the game of bowling is that there are actually specific parts of the way that the pins are arranged that if you're a pro bowler and you watch bowling, you'll notice they are always all trying to hit the same spots, whether it's on the right or the left, depends on whether they're a right-handed, left-handed bowler or what their preference is. But in general, for a pro bowler who wants to hit strike after strike after strike after strike, there tend to be the same exact spots that people are always trying to hit, which is a certain angle where if you hit it effectively, it'll knock down every pin almost every time, assuming that you can actually hit that particular angle. Now, can a novice bowler, a rookie bowler, get out there and find the heaviest ball they can handle and just hurl it down the lane, right, dead center, and hit strike after strike? Absolutely. It's absolutely possible. But it's not as likely to be consistently successful as the pro bowling technique, which is to basically hook the ball. You can watch this on YouTube, but they hook it very effectively so that it always tries to hit at a certain angle, which will just knock down every pin almost every time if you can hit it effectively. So why did we just spend a couple minutes talking about diet, poker, and bowling, right? You're asking yourself, what the hell is this guy talking about? It's ridiculous. It's because this notion of best practices or prevailing wisdom, this idea that there are things out there that people should generally do in order to be successful at that given activity, also apply to to the collection and investment market for vintage trading cards, especially vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's start off with commandment number 1, folks. You need to calibrate your risk appetite. What this means essentially is very plain and simple. Any dollars that you spend on the collectibles asset class, especially really modern stuff like trading cards, and by modern I mean like anything from the past 30 years basically. These are not yet like antiques, right? They're not like really old museum grade sort of stuff. They're still kind of fresh enough that this stuff is super risky and you got to be really careful. Any dollars that you spend on vintage trading cards or vintage collectibles should be dollars that you would be immediately okay walking away from, tossing in the dumpster, washing out to sea, or however you want to describe it, because this is well understood, right? You can Google this sort of stuff, but relative to other asset classes, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, even cash, arguably, are potentially less risky than a market for collectibles, which is largely based on arbitrary value that people assign to the assets based on their personal preferences and speculation, right? It's just a lot of flippers and resellers and all those issues that we could talk about in other videos. So just be real careful, right? Before you try to make a foray or an investment into this market, make sure that if you lost all those dollars, that it would have no impact on your personal well-being or your overall portfolio health. Minimal impact. Because there's a chance that card could get destroyed in the mail or that card could get stolen, right? There's all sorts of issues with a collectible as an asset class. So that's commandment number 1. Make sure your risk appetite is actually calibrated for your real financial situation. Number 2, commandment number 2. You must make sure that you only are prioritizing first edition cards. And this is especially for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. I don't know how true this is for other types of games or other collectible trading cards, but what's nice about the first edition stamp on these cards is that you have a pretty high degree of confidence that the company that makes these cards, they're not going to reprint first edition stuff. That's a label that's just reserved for the first stuff that comes off the printing presses. After that, when you get into Unlimited, they're going to keep reprinting that stuff like crazy, but at least with the first edition stamp, you have confidence that what you're looking at is old and that it's vintage. And most collectors share that view. They're going to be more interested in buying first edition stuff. Part of the evidence for this, if you look at the registry sets, for example, or you look at the PSA pop reports, people don't generally want to grade Unlimited stuff. They want to grade the first edition. So that tends to be where the interest lies in the market. So as a best practice, try to prioritize first edition cards. Number 3, you want to make sure that you're prioritizing vintage cards. And by vintage in Yu-Gi-Oh!, we mean some of the really OG sets, especially the 2002, 2003, 2004, arguably parts of 2005 might even fall into that category. But if you're buying stuff that's like from 2018, 2019, you got all these people trying to buy up maximum gold, and grade it and flip it. Why bother, right? It's like, that's high risk relative to stuff that's tried and tested. You can't go wrong. If you've got a PSA 10 Gem Mint from LOB, first edition, that's a safe investment. Like, everybody's going to find that valuable relative to the stuff that's more modern. So just stick to the really vintage stuff if you're interested in these sort of things from an investment perspective. Again, if you're just a collector, you don't really care about the appreciation of the value of the card or whether or not other people would want to buy it, do whatever you want. But if you are looking to invest in things that you hope are going to appreciate in value over time, going for the really vintage stuff that has a lot of connections to the really original, early days, ground floor of Yu-Gi-Oh! That's when you look at stuff from 2002, 2003, the really OG era. Commandment number 4, you must make sure that you are diversifying your portfolio. Now, for different collectors, diversification might mean different things. For people that have a very large position, diversification generally will entail having some sealed product, having some graded cards from both Beckett and PSA, having raw cards, having other Yu-Gi-Oh! Memorabilia or collectibles. That can help to ensure that if one category gets hit for some reason, if PSA has some kind of major crisis or major issue, then it's not going to impact your entire position in Yu-Gi-Oh! At the very least, you'll still have other stuff that still has value. Again, it's hard to imagine sort of what that would look like if there was one category that had a big issue, but you could imagine there's a lot of fakes, for example, a lot of counterfeit boxes. If it does become exceedingly difficult to discern counterfeit boxes from original boxes, and there's more of these like collectibles guru situations where people purchase boxes and then open them on YouTube when every indicator might suggest it's pretty authentic and they get burned, then maybe there's going to be a decline in value in the sealed product. So having a lot of stuff in the graded category would help to offset some of the erosion that might happen in the sealed market if there's issues there. You get the point, right? Make sure you're diversified. Now, for other collectors, if you're not somebody that has positions in all those different areas, you want to make sure that at the very least, the cards that you're buying are somewhat diversified. What does this mean? It means that if you're somebody that says, oh, well, I'm just going to buy up a whole bunch of Karibos. Karibo's my card, so I'm going to buy up every Karibo that I can find. You know, PSA 10 Karibo for Metal Raiders, you know, that's an OG one. I'm going to buy up a bunch of those, and then I'm going to buy up every other iteration of Karibo that I could find. Sure, you could do that, and you know, you'd probably be pretty safe if you're sticking to first edition vintage stuff. It's probably going to appreciate over time. But suppose something happens where Karibo, for some reason, becomes a less popular card relative to all the others. Its value doesn't explode as much as maybe Summon Skull or pick your other OG creature. It would behoove you to not just go all in on one monster or one card, but try to have some diversification across the different cards that you're picking and investing in. Commandment number 5, and this is an interesting tip that you'll hear a lot of eBay resellers talk about. And this commandment is basically, you must control your buying behaviors, okay? And what this means essentially is, if you're an investor in any kind of asset class, the one thing that you have total agency and control over is what you buy and at what price you're paying for it, essentially. You have a lot less control over the timing of when your stuff sells and the price at which you're ultimately able to sell it for. In other words, you can have every card in the world listed on eBay, but you're not going to have much agency or control over how many watchers you get, you know, how many offers you get, what price people will ultimately pay for it. That's just kind of subject to that moment in time, right? And what the market's willing to pay for it. Where you have a lot more control over your financial decision making is in your buying behaviors. A lot of resellers on eBay will tell you their money is made not in the selling, but in their buying. They look for very good deals. They control their spending behavior. They're very thoughtful and very deliberate about why they purchase one thing at a certain price versus not purchasing a different item at a different price. So think about your buying. Every time you click the checkout button, think about why it is that you're making that purchase. Think about whether or not you could get it for a better price if you wait a little bit longer. Think about whether that is an asset that is necessary for your portfolio. And lastly, be thoughtful about whether or not you can actually afford to purchase it. Buying behavior, keep an eye on it and control it. That's a very important piece of advice. Commandment number 6, you have to be patient in the collectibles market. In the collectibles market, it's a lot less liquid than just trading, stocks or other, very easy to move asset classes. In the collectibles market, and you can see this on eBay, there's a lot of graded cards that just sit, for months and months and months before somebody will buy them. So that's fine. You just have to be patient. Don't lose your nerve. If you have a card that you know is worth a lot of money, don't feel like you automatically just have to keep dropping your price to close the sale. It may just be the case that the right buyer has to find it. And finding cards on eBay, as you all know, is sometimes difficult. There are certain cards that I look for on a regular basis that I have a very hard time finding on eBay because people list them badly, or the algorithm, for whatever reason, just deprioritizes it relative to all the other stuff that gets listed. So be patient. eBay is a massive marketplace. There are other platforms that you can sell stuff on, but acknowledge that in a market that's a little bit less liquid than some of the other asset classes, you can't expect immediately, once you've listed something, that somebody's going to click buy it now at the price that you have it listed for. It's going to take some time to get the right buyer. Commandment number 7, you must do your research. Now, this is obviously pretty boring for some people, but look, if you're going to spend any money on an asset of any kind, you want to do your homework, right? You want to make sure that you're For other asset categories, if you're going to buy like a computer, or you're going to buy a printer or a telephone, or you're going to buy a car, or you're going to buy even something cheap, like maybe you're going to buy, I don't know, a new headset, or you're going to buy a new keyboard or something like that for your computer. You're going to do some research. You're going to make sure that the reviews that you see for the product are, pretty good in general, because you don't want to spend a bunch of money on something that's going to wind up being a piece of junk or a total lemon, right? That's going to, break on you. In the trading card market, similar kind of principle applies here. You want to make sure that you are smart about what it is that you're buying and why you think it has value. So for folks that watch this channel, you know that before I made any major decisions about my strategic position in Vintage Yu-Gi-Oh!, I rewatched the entire, or the majority of the entire original series, season 1, 2, and 3 especially. I paid a lot of attention to, because I knew that's where a lot of people, have the nostalgia and think about why certain cards were cool or fun or valuable. So look, just be smart, right? Does it mean you have to watch the whole series? No. Does it mean that you have to spend hours and hours combing through eBay, looking at sold listings versus the listing prices to do your research and understand what something's worth? Maybe not, right? But just make sure you're smart. Make sure you know what you're doing and you have a reason or, a thesis or a rationale for why you're making an investment decision in a given card or a given product. Commandment number 8. This one's pretty controversial, but you'll hear some of the most successful people in the Vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! Market will tell you, keep your 9s, sell your 10s. Now I know it sounds, somewhat contradictory, right? Because if you're a registry set collector or you're somebody that really cares about having the best of the best, then parting with a 10 can be very difficult to do. But at the end of the day, when you look at the multiplier of value for a 10 versus a 9, more often than not, you often see 10s that are listed sometimes and selling sometimes for 3 or 4 or 5 or more times the value of the 9. So one of the things that's worth thinking about is, if I really like a certain card, would it kill me to keep it in a 9 and just sell the 10 and make tons of money? For some investors, that's the right decision to make. For other collectors, it's not. But as a general guideline, if you don't really need the card or you don't really care about that card too much, then parting with the 10 may be a more advantageous investment decision than keeping the 10 and selling off your 9s and 8s and so forth. Okay, commandment number 9. Some folks may disagree with this, but it's my personal opinion that you have to love the hobby. If you're going to be a successful investor in this area, then you really need to know your stuff. And if you're going to know your stuff, you probably need to have a lot of organic interest and passion for those trading cards or whatever it is that you're investing in. You look at people like Jay Leno, right, or Jerry Seinfeld, who collect rare automobiles as an example, right? There are way more expensive items than vintage trading cards for Yu-Gi-Oh! At least. But those are people that really care about cars, right? They have a lot of interest, they have a lot of domain knowledge, a lot of experience, expertise. They've got certain cars that they're never going to part with probably because they like that stuff a lot and they care about it. And the same general principle applies for trading cards. You have to really know your stuff and you probably need to have some organic interest and passion for the hobby. If you just come into this and you're like, oh, I'm just going to I'm going to buy up a bunch of cards and flip them, Blue Eyes is popular, you're probably going to make some mistakes. You're going to buy the wrong Blue Eyes. You're going to buy the wrong grade. You're going to get scammed, right? You really need to have some passion for the hobby in order for this to be fun and for you to make the most out of it. Commandment number 10 is you probably should be following the pack. This one is very controversial, guys, but it's kind of true in a market like a vintage collectible asset. Now, I know this is contrary to what you would hear from any other asset class, right? People that are in the stock market always tell you don't just follow the ebb and flow of the day. So I'll give you an example, right? Tesla is an extremely popular stock right now, right? Its value is almost, I think it's at the all-time high right now. Elon Musk, his net worth just exceeded Jeff Bezos. He's the richest guy in the world. The prevailing wisdom in the stock market would probably be look, this is there's a lot of hype behind this. A really careful investor may not go all in on Tesla right now because it's an all-time high, right? It's very risky. Unlike the stock market where you probably don't want to just follow the pack willy-nilly and just go after the stuff that's popular. In Yu-Gi-Oh, or in Pokemon, you kind of do want to just follow the pack and go after the stuff that's popular. Which is to say, like, if Blue Eyes White Dragon and Dark Magician Girl and Jinzo and Exodia and the God cards, and all these different things are the most popular cards, then yeah, you probably do want to prioritize those sort of things in general. Not saying that you have to stick to one card or stick to one area, right? Going back to a previous commandment, you want to make sure you're diversified. But to a degree, you need to be picking up on the signals of the market and seeing where kind of the conventional wisdom or prevailing wisdom lies about the value of the cards. Because it's very easy to just buy up a whole bunch of stuff that nobody cares about that's never going to have any value at all, right? You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you're probably following the pack, or you're at least mindful and sensitive to where the pack is moving and why they're moving in that direction. All right, commandment number 11. This is a bonus commandment, guys. You need to pre-grade your cards. Let me repeat. You need to pre-grade your cards. So it's very easy if you're somebody that submits to Beckett or PSA, especially if you do it at a high volume or a high level of frequency. You get your cards, you got to put them in these sleeves, then you got to put them in the card savers. There's just a lot of labor involved in the prep for a PSA submission. Now, sure, you could pay a third party to do it for you, like a middleman or some kind of intermediary. But again, why do that if you're really passionate about the hobby and you like the cards? It shouldn't bother you or be burdensome to kind of do this process or be thoughtful about what you're submitting. So one of the things that I recommend to people all the time is like, get a magnifying glass, get a lamp, go through that painstaking, tedious process of screening your cards, because you could be wasting a lot of dollars getting back PSA 5s, PSA 6, sometimes PSA 7s for stuff that, like, on a quick glance might look like a 9 or a 10, but it's got like 1 or 2 serious issues on it that you don't really see unless you look at it in the right lighting. So please, please, please pre-grade your stuff. You'll save yourself a lot of money and a lot of disappointment when your cards come back from PSA at grades that you expected that you didn't get. And one last bonus point on this, guys. Follow PSA's rules. Okay? Like, just do it. I've seen people on YouTube that they're like, the card saver ones and all that crap, it's like expensive. And I'm just going to submit my cards. I'm just going to basically put them in a Ziploc bag, wrap them up in plastic. They'll be all out of order. Who cares? They'll figure it out when it gets there to PSA. That's a very dangerous thing to do. Like, if you're going to dump $400 or $500 on like a 50 or 60 card PSA submission, you should be taking every possible step and be as meticulous as possible in making sure that those cards are packaged and arranged and prepped to make the lives of those PSA graders as easy as possible. And if you're going to slack off and half-ass your PSA submission, then you deserve a delay. You deserve a fine for having your cards out of order. And frankly, you probably deserve, less patience and less tolerance from the PSA people that have to go through your stuff that's not packaged the way that they like. It is a very manual exercise to grade those cards. And for them, consistency is quality. Repetition is efficiency. And if your stuff isn't packaged and isn't, the cards aren't sleeved in the exact way that they want, it is a disruption to their workflow. It's going to make them angry and frustrated, and it's going to make them more likely to give you a bad grade versus another person that maybe has a marginally lower quality submission, but it's packaged and it's prepped and it's delivered to them in a way that is exactly consistent with what they want. So just be sensitive to it, folks. If you want to get the best grades possible, you should be doing everything you can to accommodate PSA's recommendations and guidelines. So that is all, folks. I know this video is probably pretty long, but appreciate the time. Feel free to drop a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you liked and didn't like, or which commandments that you agree with or disagree with, or any commandments that I may have forgotten. That is all, folks. Parkside Merchant, thanks again for your time.